Hello, everybody. I've always wanted to do this actually video, but I kind of always put it off till another time. I just wanted to tell you something about, well, a little deeper uh, about the history of my original homeland, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina. Well, let's start from the beginning. Well, I mean, most of you have read or went to college and we know something, perhaps, or have read briefly about that whole area. That's pretty much common for all those countries: Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, Montenegro. How it all began, how they started as countries. Well, it was when the Slavs first came to the Balkans, which was sometimes. Well, they didn't come all at the same time. And the first wave came in the 5th century AC, yeah, or AD, or you call it AD, yeah. um, and they mainly settled in today's Slovenia because they pushed as far westward as they could, obviously. And there was a second wave there, settled in Croatia, and then the third in the rest, pretty much, of the countries. Well, anyway, to skip that first part, before that, Illyrians were the original inhabitants of the area. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I really want to talk about is why it's such a complex subject, why it's such a complex case when it comes to nationality, ethnicity, and religion, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Well, well, we must start from when before actually the Ottoman Turks came actually, because there was something called the Bosnian Church, all right, but it was condemned as heretic by the Catholic Church and also uh, the Orthodox, yeah, Greek Orthodox Church. So because it was kind of not really so much a Christian church, but more like it was a dualist religion, kind of like Gnosticism. Yeah, it was more, yeah, Gnostic. So anyway, that church was never really supported outside of Bosnia. Uh, but Bosnia was known as the most tolerant one towards other religions. Actually, and that is why so many religions could survive there in one rather small country, rather small piece of land, let's call it that way. um, yeah, I mean, yeah, the entire Bosnia and Herzegovina is like about the size. Well, I think it's like Wales and Northern Ireland together, something like that, or maybe a little bigger than that. But anyway, so this church, Bosnian church, what happened to it is that when the Turks came in the mid 15th century, 1461, I believe, and they uh, occupied the country pretty quickly because they were actually there was a part of the Bosnian nobility that actually wanted them to take over for whatever reasons they might have had. So they actually executed the last Bosnian king. Let's call him Stephen, so it's easier for you English speakers, okay, because his real name was Stjepan Tomašević. So that would in English be like Stephen Thomas, something like that. Yeah. Stephen Thomason. So when he was executed, not so long ago after they captured the whole country, or almost the entire country, then his widow, the queen, the last Bosnian queen, Katarina, she fled to Rome, but they had actually taken her children, the Turks, and as hostages, and they delivered them to Istanbul or Constantinople, as somebody, as it already back then was still known. I mean, as so when she was unable to get the kids back, she was like, then oh to hell with Bosnia, to hell everything, and she sold the Bosnian church to Rome. So it became the Catholic Church, actually, also another part of it. So yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing is but during the Ottoman era, this was very important. Those who converted were mainly people who belonged to this Bosnian church, because now they had, they felt betrayed, right? So, and back then it was like if you converted, to Islam, you were, treated better. You could get a better job. You could become something like, an administrator, an official, or even a general in the army, if you wanted. But only if you were a Muslim, not if you were Christian. Then also, of course, as many people know, the Christian, there was this habit, this kind of custom among the Turks to take Christian children away and raise them as Turks and then let them fight. They were called the Janissaries, right? But here is the main reason why Bosnian nationality is such a really vague term today. During the whole Ottoman era, which lasted for over 400 years, just like over like 415, 16 years, I think. Uh, yeah, they the thing about that Ottoman Empire, since they had so many different nationalities under them, their goal was to, you know, how to say it, to uh, eradicate any kind of national feelings, right? Because they knew that that could lead to rebellions, and it did in places like Serbia, for instance, and Greece, of course. But those countries were not mainly Muslim, so that's why they, in Bosnia there was no national like identity. Actually, it was just religious identity. All right. So being a Muslim was bigger than being a Bosnian. It was more important. Simple as that. While at the same time, the Christians, the non-Muslims in Bosnia, they started to gravitate towards, like the Catholics started to gravitate towards Croatia, and the Orthodox, they started to gravitate towards Serbia. They more and more started feeling like they were actually Serbs and Croats and not Bosnians. So that's the reason why all this happened, later on. Why you had three different sides, and not all of them are calling themselves Bosnians, yeah. So anyway, Herzegovina on the other side, it's not really, it's just a political term. It's not a real national term. It's just to separate between those two regions, because Herzegovina is more like a southern, like, you know, very barren karst kind of region where people are pretty much like the rest in the rest of Bosnia, but some they tend to look a little bit perhaps different, but not that much. They like have more tan and stuff like that, and they speak in a different dialect. Yeah, of course, but actually there is no real big difference between a Bosnian and Herzegovinian, even though some will disagree, of course. But ethnically, no. No, only in terms of mentality, yeah, definitely. But anyway, yeah, so anyway, that's the thing. The problem is that that whole national uh, feeling, the Bosnian national feeling got neglected. The identity got neglected for so long in favor of the religious identity. So that's what was the main reason why the whole thing happened in the 90s, the early 90s, because the so-called Bosnian Serbs and Bosnian Croats didn't feel like they were the same kind of people anymore. And of course, Bosnian Muslims also, they started like just separating more and more between each other. And that was silly because the only real difference between them was the religion, right? The religious customs, stuff like that. And of course, Bosnian Muslims, they usually, even today, use a little more of those Turkish words that they inherited than the Christians, even though some actually of Christians may use them, but many of them don't like doing that because it reminds them of the time they were like very miserable, not doing so well when they were like subjects, treated as very lowly, kind of the lowest, how you say, uh, sort of the society. Yeah. So yeah, that's the big, yeah, that's how it all happened. Why it all happened, and at the same time, of course, in the mid 19th century, once it became clear that the time of the Ottomans is slowly going on the Balkans is slowly going towards its end. Uh, there was more and more pressure from Serbia and Croatia on these Bosnian Christians to declare themselves as Serbs and Croats. So yeah, many of them did, of course, most of them. So yeah, so that was actually all I had to say about that. So I'm not gonna go, of course, into what happened during the war. That's just not gonna do any good. Right. All right. So that was my history lesson for now. Take it easy. Take care. See you. Enjoy your Easter. Bye bye.